My name is Tim Poole. I'm a journalist, technologist, hacker. I travel around covering breaking news and doing videos about political issues and social and political issues, I guess. Sometimes I play with robots and hack drones and stuff.
So, what is your motivation to do this job?
I don't know. Curiosity. I like traveling. I like learning and seeing new things. So when I hear that there's going to be some kind of event that will change political discourse or policy or just have an impact on how we live, I want to see how and why it's happening. So I like traveling and going and watching these things happen, and then I can then share what I witnessed and what I learned with other people. I don't know, it's fun.
So, in general, why do you think you're independent media? Do you think there should be more independent media? Why is it important, or is it just the way that you went for?
Yeah, there should be, particularly amongst the left, right? There's a lot of people who are right-leaning, who will run their own independent channels, but for whatever reason, a lot of people on the left tend to just work for a company. There are a few channels, independent journalists, but they tend to be kind of like studio anchors, more pundit than actual on-the-ground reporters. And so when you look at, say, YouTube, which is a good example, you've got a big community of entertainers, musicians that are outside of the mainstream system, right? A lot of them are independent, but they work with bigger companies. And so this allows for a faster evolution and a diversity of ideas and content and entertainment. We need the same thing for journalism, which is why instead of going and working for another company, I decided to start doing YouTube and focusing just on my social media platforms. And one of my goals is to foster this community of people who are just driven to be independent journalists. That way we will have a bunch of different ideas. You know, a lot of media companies, they'll have their editorial stance as a company. And an individual can have that the same, but if you have 50 journalists, all with different opinions on an issue, you're more likely to, you can see the nuance, right? It's better to be able to see a distributed kind of reporting from different people than one company that says our stance on this issue is this.
Right. So we're at Bilderberg apparently now. So what got you here? What interests you about this event?
I mean, you know, Bilderberg is a bunch of high stature people, politicians, heads of industry. They're meeting and talking about stuff. Their agenda is published. I'm not as concerned about it as most of the people here. And honestly, I'm not even going to be staying for the most part. I am curious as to why, you know, the G7, the G20, that attracts a ton of press, a lot of interest in the agenda, but Bilderberg doesn't. You know, so, you know, well, I'll say this. The main reason I came down is I'm more interested in the people who come here as journalists. You know, people like Luke Rudowski or Dan Dix or even why you're here. So I'm interested in the motivation of the journalists. Who are the people that are willing to come down and look into Bilderberg? Why are they interested in it? And ultimately, I guess a bigger question that I don't think I'll ever answer is, why is Bilderberg not receiving the kind of coverage as, say, the G7 or the G20?
Right. So, if Bilderberg doesn't interest you that much, what kind of events interest you? Is it?
It's not so much about the events. It's just about traveling and seeing things that are interesting. So coming down to Bilderberg is interesting, but it's... As much as Bilderberg does have an impact on the world, I'm not going to be able to go inside and actually learn about what they're doing. So essentially, you know, coming down here doesn't serve my curiosity or my interest. I can't tell anybody anything interesting. And so, you know, the only reason I came down here is a couple-hour drive. If they were having it anywhere else, I would not have flown out for it. But I figure if I can drive here a couple hours, meet some of the people who are down here, why not? I've never been.
So you did something called the Sweden Report, where you went down to Sweden. Yeah. Could you please introduce this initiative?
Well, Trump said during a speech, you look at what's happening last night in Sweden. They took in all these people and they're seeing problems they never thought possible. This sparked a huge debate of what happened last night in Sweden. People immediately started mocking Trump, saying nothing happened. But Trump was referring to a documentary he saw the night before, and that had aired on Fox News. So while the Trump supporters are like, I understand what Trump's trying to say, the left is always just ready to pounce on Trump for anything. So naturally, a lot of the Trump supporters started saying Sweden's experiencing refugee crime and rape and these issues, and the left saying that's not true, you're making it up, crime isn't increasing. And so I decided, why don't I just go down there and see for myself, right, who's wrong? So Paul Joseph Watson from InfoWars issued a challenge to any journalist who wanted to spend time in the crime-ridden suburbs of Malmö in Sweden. And so I said, sure, I'll do that. You know, I've been to Sweden before. I've been to Malmö. I'm not that concerned about it. And so Paul agreed. He donated $2,000 to a fundraiser that I had set up before this. And it was one of the larger contributions, but ultimately accounted for about 8 or 9% of the money we actually raised. And I went to Sweden, investigated some of these claims, met many people, mayors of some town, other politicians, activists, local residents, and the goal was to see what was actually going on in Sweden.
So, could you please tell us what you experienced in Sweden? And kind of pretty short, all right? Just a summarization, and yeah, please do that first.
So I learned that there is in fact crime coming from migrants and the children of migrants. It's not necessarily the refugees, but it does exist. Is it as bad as many of the people on the right say? No, not really. But is it as safe as the people on the left? No, there's actually serious problems that anyone should be concerned about, but Sweden is still relatively safe, especially compared to the United States.
So, seeing what happened in Sweden, how would you judge the German politics in the last 3 years?
Oh, it's a complicated issue. I mean, I haven't looked into German politics. What I will say is, I said this before, any country, if you want to bring in refugees, you need to make sure you have a proper integration system set up. Because a lot of the problems Sweden is facing aren't coming from new migrants and refugees, coming from older migrants and their children who weren't integrated well. And so now they're at odds with the larger Swedish society, and that causes crime and conflict. So refugees, migrants, they can be a great boost to an economy if they're integrated properly and they're given, and when I say integrated, it means access to opportunity, to become part of the society, to make friends and really be involved in, say, German society. Whereas in Sweden, a lot of these people were sort of just cast out into the corners and never really learned the language, the food, met people, and it creates conflict.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.